Robert Trumpy was born in South Pekin, Illinois on March 16th of 1924. He stayed in Pekin through his high school years. After graduating in 1941, he attended college at Illinois State in Normal, Illinois. Then, on March 18, 1943, 2 days after his birthday, Trumpy enlisted in the armed services. He first went to a school in Little Rock, Arkansas for infantry training. Wishing to be in the Air Force, Trumpy took a test to become one of their cadets and passed. His training next took him to Miami, Florida, and St. Paul, Minnesota, as part of a college training detachment. Then Trumpy was sent back to Florida for gunnery school, where he picked up the skills needed to be a top turret gunner on a bomber. Finally, he was sent to Topeka, Kansas, to meet the rest of his 10-man bombing crew. The crew was to operate a B-24 Liberator. They named their plane the 10 Men Back because they wanted all of their fellow crew members to safely return from each mission. In October of 1944, the crew was sent overseas. The trip overseas took 30 days and ended in Napoli, Italy. Once there, the crew joined a convoy which took them to a replacement depot. At that point, replacements were desperately needed because the Air Force was losing large numbers of airmen. After conducting practice runs to familiarize themselves with the land, Trumpy and his crew were sent on their first mission.
And so our mission that day was to bomb Odertal. And on the way up there, as you know, one of our darn engines conked out, and we fell behind the formation. I'm flying the top turret, and our intercom is shot out. But I was stationed right above the flight deck, so I jumped down out of the turret. I hit him on the shoulder. I said, "We've got a fire behind number 2 engine." And he went like this to get back up there because they were still shooting at us. So I got back up there and I continued to fire. And this one FW-190 was a German fighter, pulled right up off of our right wing and stalled there. And the pilot, it jumped out. And he says, "Somebody shot him." Well, I was shooting right up. He was right above me. All I do is press the trigger. I guess it was after that I kept watching the fire behind the left inboard engine. And I could see that it was getting bigger. And I knew that if that fire ever hit our fuel tanks, we were done. Mm-hmm. We were all gone. So I jumped back down out of the turret, and I hit him on the shoulder, and I said, "We got a bad fire. We got a bad fire behind number 2 engine." And so then he rang the bell. There's a bell somewhat like a school bell, but you hear it all over the plane. And we jumped out of there, and everybody jumped out except the one man who was killed. Mm-hmm. And when we hit the ground, the Germans picked us up. The officer in charge, who pointed his .45 at between my two eyes and said, "Hands up," and I didn't argue at all. I didn't have a weapon.
Right.
I didn't want a weapon. What would you do with a weapon?
Right.
If you're 5,000 miles away from home, mm-hmm. and you don't know the language. Mm-hmm. So he got his crew of men there, and they carried me because I couldn't walk.
Trumpy's plane went down over Czechoslovakia, which was enemy-controlled territory. Trumpy was injured when he touched down. Trumpy's ankle had been shattered upon impact. As he was carried back past his crashed plane, he understood enough German to decipher that one of the members of his crew had been killed and was somewhere in the wreckage. It would be a long time before he found out the fates of all of his fellow crew members.
So, and they put me in the hospital. And I was in the hospital with the operator with his arm shut off, and the co-pilot. And it was not uncommon for some Czech family, a mother or father, and bring a little boy in to see us. And then they'd bring us in some cookies or wine. And of course, they thought we were heroes. Had 2 doctors who worked on us, and there were 2 nurses, both of them nuns, who were just wonderful people. So when the time came that they thought I could travel to a prison camp, they shipped me out of the hospital with a German guard, of course, because of all the kindness shown us by this one nun in particular. I wrote her a letter, and I thanked her for all the kindness she'd shown and for looking after, not me, I didn't need much care, but the other two did.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, and thanks for caring for my others. And then I gave her the only thing I had of value, my high school class ring.
Mm-hmm.
I said, after I'm gone, and give this to Sister Sophia. And after the war, Charlie sent that ring back to me.
Hmm.
And Sister Sophia had said, I cannot accept anything for doing the Lord's work.
Hmm.
Yeah.
After 3 weeks under the careful watch of Sister Sophia, Trumpy was taken from the hospital and sent to a POW camp in Nuremberg. He was soon moved to Stalag 7A in Moosburg, Germany, because of advancing Allied troops. Trumpy remembers that the camps were very primitive.
In our tent, there probably were 100, 150. You'd get two guys and put them together, and they were partners, and you slept side by side and kept your shoes on so they wouldn't be cold. And with the 4 blankets, you could stay fairly warm. There was some water that we could get to, but for the time that we were in prison camp, we never took our clothes off.
Trumpy vividly remembers April 29th of 1945, the day that Patton's Third Army reached Stalag 7A. The POWs were liberated.
For a fact, we got up that morning and we could hear some rifle shots, machine gun shots. And somebody said that our troops were advancing, and all the German guards were gone. And we heard these shots, and they said, "Stay down, keep your head down, because you never know where these shots are coming from." So it was probably at 11 o'clock in the morning when finally they ran our flag up over the main compound. And then we knew that our fellows had prevailed.
Though the soldiers had been freed, they were still stuck waiting to be sent home.
We were coming back from Chow, and there was a line of prisoners standing going into this building that looked like a big gymnasium. I said, "Why do you suppose those guys are standing in line?" He said, "Well, let's go find out." And we said, "Well, why are you guys standing in line?" And they said, "Well, we're lining up to get our papers to go home." So I said to my buddy, I said, "Let's get in line." He said, "They haven't called us yet." I said, "The worst thing they can do when we get inside is for the officer to send us back to the tent. Well, let's get in line and see what happens." So we got in line, and it was 6:30 at night when we got in line. We were eventually out of there. We got our stuff and we're out of there at 10 o'clock the next morning.
Oh, wow.
And so when we didn't know what had happened. We just got in line, and the first officer at the first desk asked us some questions, name, rank, serial number, and we told him what they were. He gave us the papers and passed us on to the next guy. He passed us on to the next. Pretty soon we were down to the end, and we have orders to get on the boat and go home.
Trumpy was finally returning home to his family and friends. He never forgot his 10-man crew. Years later, Trumpy was reminded of his time in the service.
40 years to the day we were shot down, we invited our crew members here to Springfield. And of course, here are guys talking about things that happened that day and before and after, and we hadn't seen each other for 40 years.
Trumpy was very quiet about the time he spent fighting for his country. He never even disclosed his experiences to his family. It is obvious that the war was a very trying experience for him.
So overall, how was your World War II experience?
Well, I'd rather not have been shot down, taken a prisoner of war.
It is hard to express how grateful we are that we were presented with this opportunity. This project has given us a personal perspective on World War II that goes far beyond a normal classroom experience. One cannot help but respect a man like Robert Trumpy, who made so many sacrifices for the freedom of others. Thank you, Mr. Trumpy, for granting us an interview and for the brave and noble sacrifices you have made for our country. We have learned so much from Mr. Trumpy. His story is truly one of courage and perseverance. We are glad that Mr. Trumpy's story will be there for future generations, so our descendants may appreciate the price that our brave veterans were willing to pay for freedom.